smartest guys around are about to break it down like they've won the game a million times.
Well, actually, they didn't really win the game at all.
Survivor know it all. Survivor know it all. Stephen without it down. Got the game all figured out. They know it all.
Yes, that's right. Finale night, season 42 is in the books. And we are here on a huge night.
Yeah.
And congratulations to the newest winner of Survivor, the 40th person to win. It's none other than Maryanne Oketch. Congratulations, Maryanne. How are you, Stephen Fishbach?
I'm thrilled. I love this season. I thought it was an extremely fun season. A great cast.
Fun.
Dangerous, fun. Yeah.
So fun. All fun. No, but in all
Harder
seriousness,
than ever before.
Yes.
More dangerous, more monstrous, and very and so thrilled with the winner. I thought, honestly, it was extremely fun to watch Maryanne win. It was also fun even just to watch Maryanne's story, because going into or in the early episodes of this season, you know, no way is Maryanne winning. Like, that girl who is portrayed consistently as annoying, as not as, you know, the next person they're going to vote out, as you know, feuding unnecessarily or necessarily, as the case may be. And then we get this extremely like full fleshed out picture of like of an interesting, unique, fun, great strategic player, capstone with his all-time final tribal council performance. Truly a great tribal council, one for the ages. I'm excited to talk to you about why. Yeah, it was so
much.
Great.
For Maryanne, such an interesting 26-day journey. You know, she touched on it earlier in her final tribal council performance of, you know, that, you know, her game wasn't as tight as she might have thought it was earlier in the game. And she did concede that. But I feel like she really came into her own as a player. I feel like that she came across as more mature as we got closer to the end of the season. And we certainly do see that among young people in their early 20s when they go on to play, especially when they are the winner of the season. And I thought the edit gave us a lot of Maryanne all the way through, but I think that the edit probably did paint a pretty true picture where this wasn't necessarily a season where it's like we didn't get to see, and maybe we get to see everything that she was doing, but it seemed like that her game sort of came together right at the end, almost as we saw it, where that we saw a lot of people on the jury say we weren't really sure what your game was until she was able to express it so incredibly well at that final tribal council. As you said, one of the great final tribal council performances from Maryanne, and just a runaway win in the end.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that final tribal council was her big move. I tweeted that. I think that was her move of the season, was this really exceptional final tribal council performance where she, you know, not only really answered the jury's questions, responded to their doubts, was so thoughtful, you know, in accepting their criticism, so emotionally open and so emotionally honest about her weaknesses and her growth. But also really told this story. You know, I mean, she had an idol that she didn't have to play. You know, you could be like, hey, and guess what? I had an idol that I didn't have to play. But then she turned it into this like mythic object, you know, like the one secret of the season that nobody knows about. And this was what enabled me to do this. You know, like she really like turned it into a thing. And that, you know, I think got her the win.
Yeah. So a lot of great stuff to unpack from Maryanne's win tonight. Just to set the stage for what's coming up here on Rob Has a Podcast, I will have Exit Press with the final 5 of video interviews with all 5 people from the episode. Lindsay, Jonathan, Mike, Romeo and of course, Maryanne, the winner of the season. We'll have that all for you on Thursday. And then I will be taking more of your questions on Thursday. Jenny Autumn will be back to do a special post-finale feedback show coming up on Thursday where we will unpack everything from Maryanne's win. Make sure you subscribe to robisawebsite.com/subscribe to not miss any of that. Yeah, this was such a huge night for Maryanne. Interestingly, she becomes the second Black woman to win the game, which comes 1 week. It's been 20 years and 1 week since Vecepia won back in 2002. I had a really interesting interview with Vecepia, who was very excited about the prospect of Maryanne winning, and that's a really interesting bookends where Maryanne, also a seminary student, of course, Vecepia, talked so much about her faith during her win. So really interesting to have Maryanne join the ranks of the Black women winners now, 2 of them in Survivor, the 5th Black winner of the show. So history made for Maryanne as breaks a very long drought for Black women winners of the show. Stephen, Maryanne just was all season long. I just thought that she was this incredible character, and it's so fun to have her as the winner of the season here, where you really do not often get that on Survivor, where the breakout character ends up being the winner.
Well, and I actually think that's because, like, I feel like this is a real step forward in the editing. And, I certainly talked a lot of last season about how under-edited Erica was. And I think this was the opposite, where, typically the winners are so smoothed out that they become kind of bland. We don't get to see their weaknesses. We don't get to see their idiosyncrasies. We just kind of see, their best moments, their strategic insights, certainly their family stories, their personal stories, but never just their wackiness or their oddness or, their bad qualities, and I mean, I'm sure you saw it, I saw it in the 2 seasons I played. Like, the people who won, they were much more complex and flawed and interesting and weird than the sort of somewhat, anodyne version on television. Just getting to see all that whole human picture was such a wonderful, thing to experience.
I mean, it's been talked about ad nauseum, the differences between Survivor 42 and Survivor 41. But really Survivor 41 had a winner where then a lot of people, there was like confusion after the win. Like, wait, what happened? Why didn't we see anything? I don't feel great about the way that this was necessarily shown. We wanted to see more from the winner, but here in season 42, we have this truly interesting person who won the game. We got to see her journey all the way through, and there's no mixed feelings at all about the way that we got to see Maryanne play the game this season.
Right. Yeah. And we really, there was so much of her throughout in a way that felt true and a way that felt really organic for her journey and her story. And yeah, I mean, to your point, like, she's also like a character, a bit of a weirdo, in a great way. And
Stephen, she could have been the first boot in this season and we would remember her forever.
Yeah. Just, I mean, everyone in the first episode was talking about how much they loved her joy and her like big ebullient personality. And yeah, I mean, it would have been, like you said, I mean, the stuff with Zach, was a hilarious, great beat that would have been in there regardless of whether she won or not, so it was just a lot of like great big moments.
I want to talk through some of the different aspects of this finale that got us there. And so a big part of the first hour, which I did think was super interesting, was ultimately Maryanne's gambit at the final 5, where Maryanne is presented with a very interesting decision where she as she said back in the episode where they had the rice negotiation, not me using emotional manipulation as a weapon. She is able to hold Mike. Mike's making a lot of promises. I think Mike promised that he was going to use his idol on you as well, I think, at the final five. And Mike, promised that he would use the idol on Lindsay for some reason. He promised Maryanne, if she went along with the plan, that he would play the idol on Maryanne at the final five. And Maryanne was left with this really interesting decision to make, where she could have, in one fell swoop, gotten Mike to play his idol on her, leaving Jonathan vulnerable. And she could have stood up in front of the jury and put the immunity idol on Lindsay and saved Lindsay and sent Jonathan out of the game in that spot. It would have been a huge move, and it would have been shades of Natalie Anderson back at the San Juan del Sur final five, when she stands up in front of the jury and says to Jacqueline, "Did you vote for who I told you to?" And then she ultimately ends up saving Jacqueline in that spot. And I think that's how Keith Nail ends up going out of the game. And ultimately, no, maybe I think was it Baylor? Yeah, Baylor. She takes Baylor out that way. Anyway, but it's an incredible moment in front of the jury, unforgettable. And she decides not to.
Yeah,
she's gonna keep her powder dry.
Yeah,
and say like, okay, yeah, that would be a huge move, but can I beat Lindsay?
Right.
I thought that was just such an interesting turning point in the episode.
Yeah, and what she's in her rationalization for that at Final Tribal, of how I could have saved Lindsay, but then I'm putting myself in a position to lose, and making it so personal and emotional, of I felt like I needed to allow myself to deserve to win, like I had to open up the possibility for myself that I could win. That was it was so interesting.
And I don't ever really remember in the history of the show so much celebration for a move that was not made. The road not taken of right. I could have done this. So I thought also there's a scenario where Lindsay's like, wait, you could have saved me?
Well, that's what I thought she did a good job of, both presenting this possibility of I could have saved Lindsay, and also explaining,
but I couldn't beat you, Lindsay.
Right. I couldn't beat you. Like, me voting you out was the seminal moment in my personal transformation. I mean, that's, how do you not vote for that person? But right. What about the possibility of saving Jonathan there? So is there a version where she says, I want this big flashy move, I'm gonna put my idol on Jonathan?
But Jonathan wasn't getting voted out.
I guess it wouldn't have been such a flashy move.
Yeah, I guess if she would have had if she really could have thrown Romeo and Lindsay okay, vote for Jonathan tonight, and I'm going to save Jonathan and just chastise them.
Yeah.
But I think that she was right. Where I think that Jonathan was, as we had suspected, probably considered more of a GOAT. Maryanne did have the correct read on that she certainly wanted Jonathan in the final three, more so than Mike. Also, kudos to you, Stephen Fishbach, who said for all season long, Lindsay's out at the final five.
Yeah, I've been pushing that. I mean, I was wrong about basically everything else I said, but I did get Lindsay at the
hang
final
your hat on
correctly.
That one. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. So no, that was just a really interesting spot there. So really wild that Mike ultimately did come through and play the immunity idol on Maryanne, especially after we saw Omer go out of the game basically on, Lindsay, didn't play her immunity amulet on the one person that was her closest ally. Mike kind of lets his number one ally also be vulnerable in that same exact spot, but ultimately it works out for Jonathan.
I think Mike at that situation 100% knows that Jonathan is not going home, or I think he would have played it. I think if there was a chance Jonathan was going home, and he also promised Jonathan, as you know, but he said to Jonathan, if there's any chance you're not safe, I will save you. I got the sense that there was no chance he wasn't safe, so Mike was
Stephen, all Maryanne had to do was play the idol on Lindsay, and Jonathan would have gone home. Mike didn't see it That's the thing. Like,
Yeah.
if he knew that there was that the people were plotting to take out Jonathan, he would have saved him. But the
Maybe
thing
he
was,
didn't.
he almost like, I mean, this would have been like a Reichenbachian disaster. I mean, now for Mike, he would not have gone out of the game, but it would have been just like, people would have been screaming, "Mike, you idiot."
Should Mike have played the idol before the votes were? Wait, he didn't, right? I feel like if you're going to play an idol on someone, you want to do it before the votes are cast.
Okay, talk that through.
Well, just because it makes it look like you're actually affecting the vote, I mean, to be fair, unless you like really think you know where the votes are going and you want to make a big move of invalidating all the votes. But if you're going to play the idol on someone like Maryanne, who isn't going home.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like when you're doing sort of like a showy idol play, and that person isn't going home, you're just sort of trying to like show loyalty. Then you put the necklace on Maryanne in that spot. Yeah, I think there's something to that. I like that.
I want to get before the votes, because then you like looks like you're having an impact on things, and then even like you could say like, hey, she's only here because I played the idol for her.
Mm-hmm.
She was going home that night.
Yeah. And this story, which ultimately comes up in the final tribal council, I want to give credit to Maryanne also for this, where Chanel asks a question about basically like your personal growth arc.
Yeah.
And Maryanne is able to, she's got this story in her back pocket. She uses the question about, what your personal growth in the game to tell, like she pivots in that story. Like she starts telling about a personal story in real life and ultimately tells this story about what she did. And I just thought that was such a great way to, get to this big talking point that she had.
Oh my God. Her storytelling throughout the finale was, I remember like on like, I don't know if did you ever watch like Best Food Network Star, where they would always be like, you make every story like a personal story, like talk about some anecdote from your childhood that influences like why you're preparing the dish in exactly this way. And I feel like that's exactly what she did. They were like, what's your physical contribution? Well, my family, they always eat this fish, and I've learned, from watching my parents how to like scale the fish, and maybe I wasn't the person catching the fish, but I was the one who could scale the fish, just like she really turned everything into such like a rich anecdote.
Yeah. Well, I did a live Q&A today earlier in the day to get finale predictions from the listeners. And one of our listeners had called in. I believe this was his name is Josh. And he said that, hey, Maryanne is a seminary student. This is the kind of stuff that like being the talking in front of the group, like this is in her wheelhouse. That she is going to have a masterful final tribal council performance if she gets there. And I think that really did. I mean, she was so polished with all of the questions. And of course, like just the way that she received the questions, she was thanking the jury members. I mean, it was a master's class of how to conduct the final tribal council.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that question. That's a great, like,
I appreciate you bringing that up. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. And like, I guess I didn't see that perspective, but now I do. And like Mike, the same question about, his physical contribution. He's like, me, like I never stopped working. That's how it was, like it was just like 3 sentences. And it was not not at all equivalent.
So Stephen, we got to the Final Four challenge, and now while Maryanne did not see all of Survivor Token teams, she did. She did see. She knew enough to know about Samotion. Did you know the backstory of the fateful Samotion challenge?
Well, that it was an art project. I did. They told us at Token Sheens. Yeah, that the way where it came from.
Yes. Are there a lot of art projects that are going on behind the scenes on Survivor?
Yes. There's like a whole, the crew has their whole like, the whole rich, life out there. There's like, I think there's like a whole variety of art projects, and there's like some big festival at the end where they all present their art projects.
Are you being serious?
I mean, I don't know the specifics. It's all very hazy, but like there's always like big events that everyone like
Burning
leaves
Man?
Ponderosa to go. Exactly. They all leave Ponderosa. Oh, we got the big festival tonight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You guys are on your own. Fend for yourselves.
Got the whole backstory of the challenge.
Yeah. Very interesting.
But incredible that Maryanne, I mean, I did not even know the name of Samotion.
Yeah, it's burned into my eyelids.
Yeah, you knew it. You knew it. Yeah. Okay. But ultimately, this was wild that Romeo ends up winning the Final Four immunity challenge, beating out Jonathan. By the way, Jeff seemed furious with Mike.
Mike,
Stephen, could you,
yeah.
would you imagine? Could you imagine? I mean, Stephen, when you went
Just
out on this
humiliating
challenge,
him.
it was like, oh my God, Stephen, what is wrong with you?
I mean, to be fair, like I actually did receive a few of those when I would like dropped early from challenges. He'd be like, "Wow, didn't know that was possible." But yeah, there was. I mean, at the final five, you kind of want a little, you know, kindness.
I don't know. I guess Jeff was hoping for like a big showdown with Mike and Jonathan, but
they really like that was like I think the worst emotion performance. Someone you fact check me, but I think this was the worst emotion performance.
Check out the
ever.
Survivor Wiki.
Because we just got to 4 balls. They dropped it on 3 balls, right? And I'm pretty sure that subsequent Samotions did better than we did. I thought we were the worst until now, 4 balls, but we were the first, you know. But
Mike
I think
was out on what, 1
ball. That's really unbelievable. I mean, he did like have it in his hand, and he just like, you know. But I think this is the worst overall Samotion performance that ever.
Yeah. You don't think Mike threw it, right?
Stop. Are you screwing with me?
Okay. I mean, I'm just talking it through. You'd probably want to make it look a little better than that.
Every time so there's a shockingly bad challenge performance, people are like, oh, he was sandbagging. The War Dog theorem.
Yeah. So ultimately, we get a showdown between Romeo and Jonathan, and you know who had it that Romeo is going to beat out Jonathan heads up in a challenge, but he does. And I think it's kind of an interesting call here for Romeo that I'm not necessarily sure he made the right decision. Did you give any thought to this about what Romeo should have done here?
Yeah, so it's a tough one. It really is a tweener. And so first of all, what a great moment, you know, like it was like a perfectly told story where even like the loser has like a huge, like a really big personal moment. You know, it's like exactly what you want at like the end of a book where all the strands come together. And like, even though Romeo lost, he like won the big challenge, you know? And I don't know. So I think he made the right call. And but I'm not totally sure.
Yeah.
And here's why. Like, assuming that Mike and Maryanne are the two, you know, the 2 favorites going into the final tribal.
Yeah.
I think you don't want to give either of those people like a big hero moment, right? You want Jonathan to win fire, knock out one of the favorites, and then Jonathan's got the big hero fire moment. Either way, you're going up against at least one of the favorites. Now you're thinking like maybe Romeo can pick up some votes. I mean, to be fair, like here, okay, I'm going to backtrack right now. Because Maryanne and Mike are probably appealing to different types of players. And maybe Romeo, so Romeo's thinking like, Romeo's logic for keeping Maryanne was, I wanted to be there with someone who played like me. That's probably his worst bet, you know, to be there with someone who he thought played like him, but who was more likable than him. Yeah. So maybe he should have put Maryanne in.
So I think that Romeo really underestimated Maryanne. I think that, like, again, knowing everything that we know, I think that Romeo's best bet was against Mike and against Jonathan. And I think that what he should have done is, I'm going to take Jonathan to because basically, like, humiliating, right? For Romeo to win the Final Four challenge. Like, I'm going to take, I'll take, let me take this guy. And then I almost feel like if Mike, the firefighter, goes in and beats Maryanne in the fire ring.
No big thing for
it's
Mike.
not like that Mike is gonna be able to really like beat his chest of like, hey, look what I did. It's like it's almost like he gets almost no credit beating Maryanne in fire.
That's interesting.
And so and then also what I like about that for Romeo is that he's sort of like, if people look at Mike and Jonathan as pair, then he has a little bit of the like, I'm the third option. You know, I'm a little bit, I'm Sandra sitting next to, Russell and Parvati. They work together. You're mad at them. I'm the ultimate underdog here.
That's a great point. Like, if you want, because you do sort of want, like if the people who don't want to vote for, the Mike Jonathan duo, now they can vote for Maryanne.
Right. And some of that Jonathan, like, oh, did you see the way that he talked to the women around here? Like, oh my God, like, maybe I think you're in play for is Lindsay salty with Mike? Some of the bitter, Mike and Jonathan votes potentially. I mean, I think Mike is still winning that one, and it's probably not that close. But I think that Romeo had more of a shot there, where I think that to take another underdog. And I think he had no idea just how good Maryanne was going to be in the final tribal council and all of the things that she was going to have up her sleeve. I think that just basically he was drawing dead.
But not for nothing, Romeo had a great final tribal council. Like he had a really good performance. He was honest. He I thought made a lot of great points about how he didn't, that whole thing about how I didn't want to play from the bottom, that's what I had to do. When Jonathan asked him the question about what big move you played, and he was like, I made alliances, and Jonathan's like, yeah, okay, I've heard enough. Like a little bit jerky. But he didn't have a big move to his name, and that's because of the position he was put in. And, in spite of everything you said about him coming back, he never had that big comeback that you were predicting. And yeah, I mean, I thought he made the best he could have with what he had. And he, sometimes people go in there and they just say these delusional things about their games. And I felt like Romeo was very honest and self-aware.
What did you think about the performance from the jury tonight? That it was commented on that, Jeff really thought, Jeff obviously loved the cast. I mean, what's not to love? Really commented on just how they got to their questions, didn't make it too personal, didn't seem to be on the attack too much.
Yeah, it was. I think I truly possibly the best jury ever. I mean, again, recency bias, but it really felt like they were asking the hard questions. They were pushing the contestants, hey, that's not what you just said, or that's not what's being asked, or you need to elaborate. You're not giving us what we want. But it never felt personal or vindictive or hostile. It really did feel like the jury was trying to get each of these contestants to tell the most compelling story. And it's exactly what you want out of this jury phase. And I don't know, to me, I loved it. I mean, do you agree?
Yeah, I thought they did a really good job overall. I still would like to see the survivors give an opening statement. I felt like that they didn't let the survivors give an opening statement, but they did let Tori give an opening statement of all right, here's your game. Mike, you were this person. Maryanne, you were this person. Romeo, you were also this person. Do you disagree with any of that?
But see, I think that's great. You kind of want to know what the jury's sort of working perspective of you is, because you don't necessarily know how you're perceived when you go into to tribal, in your head you've got all of your great feats and deeds, but you don't know how much of that translated to what the jury kind of as a collective brain, how they consider you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That Tori said about Romeo, she said that Romeo, my impression of you was that you were just paranoid all the time and just voting for random people. He's like I would the one part of that I would push back is that I was paranoid. So you were voting for random people? Is that? Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about Mike in the final tribal council, because I think that Mike got caught up in a classic final tribal council faux pas tonight. And
it did look like Mike lost, right? Mike, yes. When Jeff asked who was planning to vote for Mike, it was 5 people raised their hands. It looked like Mike lost the game in final tribal.
It seemed that there certainly was a path to victory for Mike tonight.
Oh, did they show the votes, by the way? I missed it if they did.
I'm
assuming Jonathan was Mike's one.
I think it was 7-1. Yeah, I have to assume it was Jonathan. I don't think they did show the votes.
The only other person who it would have been was Roxroy, but Roxroy said he was swayed by Maryanne.
Yeah,
right? So I
pretty confident it was Jonathan.
Jonathan, yeah.
Anyway,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but for Mike, that it seemed like that this was more of a Mike stumble in conjunction with a Maryanne incredible performance.
Yeah. Mike really did get lost in this sort of classic, conundrum of I played a loyal game. I played a game with integrity. And maybe, 20 seasons ago,
Well, actually, it's funny because it's not exactly 20 seasons ago, but actually this dynamic a little bit reminded me of Survivor South Pacific of Coach Sophie Albert. Romeo is the 0 vote finalist. Not that there's anything wrong with that. And then you also have, Coach who's talking about can't really come around to say that that he did play, try to deceive people and his word wasn't quite as good as that he had maintained it was. And then you had Sophie, who was sort of the person who was, and again, the Sophie and Maryanne game, differences, but was definitely seen as, the person who was coming on as, more authentic compared to especially the person who was, claiming that they were all about, this honest game that they had played.
Yeah, I mean, I also thought of that coach parallel. I think the big difference, though, is that it really seemed in that instance like the jury did not want to vote for coach, right? Savai came in really not wanting to vote for coach.
Sure. I think that Mike played a better while coach's game in South Pacific was dominant. He asserted his will over Upolu in ways that Mike did not across the way. I think that Mike was more well liked than coach ultimately was in South Pacific. And so I don't think he had as far to claw back from. But essentially, I think that their mistake in the final tribal council is a similar one.
Well, I saw a few people on Twitter were suggesting, and I thought this was really interesting, that Mike may not even have known how great a game he played. He might not have even been able to articulate how elegantly he used his social, he seemed, and maybe it was because of the structure of the final tribal, to kind of really create this distinction between these incredible social bonds he had, getting to know these people, and this rich strategic game he had where he sort of was able to use those bonds and then kind of be in everybody's ear. And I think towards the end, he did a much better job of saying, this was, this rich tapestry of humanity that I was so excited about. And then we all formed alliances as a result of that. And, maybe I was wrong about some of, playing a game with integrity. He did kind of get it and start to backpedal, and kudos to him for doing that. But I wonder if, I don't know, maybe it's not fair to say he didn't know it, but if he had just been able to say, I used those social bonds, and that is, I think, so much what the jury wants to hear is, I did this deliberately. Thing that was intuitive to me was which was creating these bonds, being friends with you, and then being part of alliances as well. That was a deliberate strategy.
Yeah. One of the things ultimately for Mike that I was surprised didn't come up at the tribal council was when he talked about how one of his best moves was when he masterminded getting high out of the game. And I would have bet anything that Omer would have said well, actually, what happened there? I was surprised that didn't come up.
Well, but it sort of had, though. Didn't High kind of when they had that back and forth, didn't High kind of say at some point that Omer was lying to you?
I'm not sure. We'll have to go back and check.
Maybe I added that in. Maybe I had a mental interpolation of that.
Yeah.
But I felt there was at some point when the whole back and forth about I never lied to anybody happened. There was a big back, right? When Mike said that, and then people really pushed back on that.
Yeah. Chad is saying that Lindsay had said that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that was obviously, there, right? That Mike was not as dominant a strategic player as, the other thing that people have been saying too is it's not like this was Omer sitting at the final tribal who played really a masterful, strategic game and then was trying to pitch it as integrity. Mike had a solid strategic game, but it wasn't so overwhelmingly dominant and strategic that it could exist on its own merits. He had to sell it to some degree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mike was a very well-rounded player. I don't want to diminish what Mike did in the game that, we talked about in the first half of the game, certainly pre-merge, that Mike had, maybe the best social game of anybody that was out there where he was, making these incredible bonds with people it did seem like that, as the, sort of the bigger strategic threats were starting to eclipse him, and it seemed like that maybe he wasn't always in the loop, but he was always so well liked that it was hard for, even when at times it seemed like, okay, the next person that maybe should be targeted is Mike. I don't think there was ever enough like social capital going against him to be able to take him out of the game.
Yeah, it seemed like he was in every conversation, had his finger on the pulse of basically the things that were happening, was able to move the needle when he needed to. I mean, I thought he played a really strong strategic game.
Yeah.
But yeah, he just got lost in kind of like trying to pitch it. And obviously, like, this idea of integrity is so important to him in his personal life that he, and maybe that's his credo in his personal life. And then it just got in the way. He was like, I'm sure he came in thinking like, hey, I've got this great pitch about this great game I played full of integrity. And it was just not at all what the jury wanted to hear. And I think that's part of it too.
Yeah.
It's just like the jury really was looking for something else, even if that's not fair of the jury. Like Omer's response in the reunion show, was like, well, maybe Mike played a more obvious strategic game, but then he talked about it in the terms of integrity, and that's not what I was looking for. Like, Omer wasn't even saying like that's not true. He's saying like, I wanted something different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think everybody was looking for Mike to just come out and say, like, yeah, I told you my game was all about honor and integrity, but that, yeah, I told you that so that I could manipulate you, and I'm so, and it hurt me, and I hated doing it, but that was what I needed to do to beat you, as opposed to he really was sticking to his guns for a while, and then ultimately said, yeah, it turns out I guess I didn't play the game with integrity like I thought I did.
But don't you think for Mike out there, like in his mind, he probably did play with integrity? Like, I remember being out there and thinking like, okay, I can say to you, I can like swear, I can tell you a lie. I can say, I swear I'm telling the truth, but I won't swear on my family. Like you have these like levels of like personal integrity when you're not used. Most people in their daily lives are not constantly lying to people's faces. Mm-hmm. So, you do kind of have to like create this sort of like moral wiggle room for yourself to say like, I'm still a good person. I'm just like playing this game and I'm like lying, but it's not like a real lie. And maybe in his head, like, he had so much space, where it was like, I'm playing a game of integrity. Now, obviously I'm lying to that person, but I'm still playing a game of integrity because I'm not shaking hands and lying. And I wonder if like that was so much a part of the mental construct that allowed him to play this duplicitous game that he really had trouble getting away from.
So I think for Mike, I think that he felt like, okay, I'm giving this person my word, I'm giving this person my bond. But then when he felt like that person had betrayed him, whether or not that was actually, happening, if he felt like that they were betraying him, he sort of had carte blanche at that point to do whatever he needed to do. And that wasn't a violation of the bond that he had made with these people.
Right. And I think Erin mentioned when I talked to her, like, sometimes he would create that excuse for himself, or maybe it was you who said that. One of these great, Survivor third placers said that when
Welcome Romeo. Yeah.
when with the high thing, like he kind of like allowed himself to believe Omer's story because he knew he needed to get out high. Mm-hmm. So he kind of like created that space for, oh yeah, High's been deceiving me, so now it's totally fair for me to flip on him. Mm-hmm. But yeah, like if he had come in and said something kind of like, who was it? Was it Sarah who had that whole thing about like, yes, I formed these. I mean, a lot of winners have said things like this, but I'm thinking of Sarah specifically. Like, right? It was like, I formed these rich bonds with you, and those bonds were sincere, and I also used those bonds to advance myself in the game. And like, that's just the crazy game we're playing. Like that, I think could have been a winning pitch.
Yeah, I think so. And certainly against a person who did not have as polished of a Final Tribal Council performance as Maryanne.
Yeah. I mean, Maryanne was just so great. She just moved so fluidly from like really specific breaking down of moves. I did this and that and that and that. And sometimes, I what's interesting about the way she did it was like, I feel like sometimes people making that pitch at Tribal Council can get really like too lost in the minutia. And then you said this, and then he said that. And then the way she broke it down, I felt like she was at just the right level of abstraction of like giving the requisite parts of the move, but not getting too bogged down in the details. And she was emotional. She was, engaged. It was just great. And, she had a little bit of showmanship with like the one secret of the game.
I thought that her answer to Tori's question, I thought that she, had Tori's vote no matter what. But when she talked about, Tori said, it seemed like that you were not taking parts of the game seriously. And, when somebody is, your ally, I always wonder, is this like an alley-oop? Is this where, she knows that like Tori knows what the jury wants to hear? And she gave this great answer about how like all of the young strategic players got targeted from the game, from Zach to Swathi, to Lydia, and you too, Tori. You were a young person who was strategic, and that's why you got targeted in the game. And so I realized that I had to downplay that, which sort of like scratches the question off about like, okay, well, why wouldn't we see Maryanne be more strategic? No, this was a conscious decision that she was making. So she just did, so many things right in this final tribal council.
Yeah. She just nailed it. It really was a great performance.
Incredible.
Truly. Yeah.
Stephen, this is now the second season in a row where we have the final tribal council live vote count and then immediately going into the after show. Are you getting used to this? Jeff Probst announced this week that Survivor will continue even if the eradication of the coronavirus is to happen some point in our lifetime. Then they will still go back to Fiji and do the votes this way.
So I really liked it last season. I like it felt very fresh, it felt very raw. The cast was really raw. I honestly liked it a little bit less this season. I mean, tell me what your perspective is here. Like I felt, in this, like I didn't necessarily feel like I was getting anything new that I wouldn't have gotten, or that particularly interesting. I mean, whatever, like would I've gotten something that interesting from, the 6 month later reunion where everyone's dressed up, and looks great. It would have been interesting to hear, has Romeo made life changes? That was one of the big stories of the season. Like Romeo, like they're on the island.
Like you get an update on what everybody's doing now. I mean, I think that's a big part of it because I feel like that they didn't use the time like particularly effectively overall, where when we spent like 5 or 6 minutes talking about what does the new era mean.
That was like it was like they're trying to fill time. Like, isn't this dangerous? Isn't this crazy? Like,
but isn't it what is it like to ask the people that are in the show, what the show is like. I mean, isn't this every single tribal council what they do every single week? We spend like 5 or 6 minutes every episode talking about what the new era of Survivor is like.
I would like to not hear about it anymore. I think that's like the really new era will be when we stop talking about the new era.
Stop talking about the new era.
You had a very funny tweet that like, what was like, it was about,
the first rule of the new era of Survivor is that you always have to talk about it's not the old era of Survivor.
I don't know if they had some, they talked about the amulet stuff and like, that was fun, but like, I don't feel like I necessarily got anything new. I mean, it was fun to reminisce, with the cast. That was a fun moment, but it was like, okay, like, yeah, that was fun. I didn't feel like there was anything. And whereas with Reunion, I was like, I don't know. I mean, I get go ahead.
In the reunion show proper, that they are able to know like what were the big moments of the season, and they're able to talk about them. And as Jeff told us tonight, which explains a couple of different things, they have not even seen any footage from Survivor 41, so they don't even know what worked in Survivor 41 to be able to make decisions for season 42. So they're sort of like at a loss of like, they know what happened, but they don't necessarily know what the biggest moments of the show were. And the other players don't really know all of the moments.
Yeah. I think that's a little I've always heard, like, I think that they've started cutting the episodes by like the time, the first episode of the show by the time the season ends. So I'm not totally sure that's 100% true. But
Stephen, may I talk with you about the pizza? And again, perhaps they did not get to cutting the finale of season 41 to go back to the well of serving the refreshments during the reunion show. But for all of the incredibly talented people that work on this show, how are they how is anybody making the call of that we need to be watching these people eat? It's very and have
and ask for more Yeah.
Waiters and waitresses like walking around, giving pizza. And the thing that kills me about this is that Jeff is like, all right, we're going to take a break. Okay. And then let's get everybody more pizza. And then we'll come back and talk about blah, 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 blah. You took a break. Yeah. Let everybody have a snack. And then we can get on the next 20 minutes without watching people stuffing their faces.
Yeah. You're really not a big fan of the pizza. Yeah. This has been a big thing for you. I mean, I guess you love pizza. It's very distracting for you.
Pizza's fine. Pizza's very good. In fact, I would say I love it.
Yeah.
That being said,
maybe that's the issue. You love it too much.
Maybe I love it. Maybe I love it too much.
Eating it.
Right. I mean, other than if you're watching a cooking show, I mean, how many shows do you sit down of like, all right, we're gonna interview these people about something, and they're eating a sandwich.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah. That can be refined. I think I'm into seeing this a few more times. I get Jeff's point of, after people come back and they have watched the show and they've read the tweets and they've all met all the other cast members.
Okay, that's fine. There's a point that, but like you could we take 15 minutes and give the final three a snack, give them something to eat, and then the people that just came from the Ponderosa also well, they're
not eating pizza at Ponderosa.
They're not. I'm sure they're eating pizza at Ponderosa. I mean, we wouldn't know this season, but yeah. I mean, like, if you want to feed them, I talked about all this last season, but like, if you didn't see last season, I had that these takes are new to you.
Yeah. I want dirt. That's what I want. I don't want like a rehash of like, hey, wasn't this moment fun? And they're like, that moment was so fun. It was such a crazy moment.
How about this? Like, we didn't get Ponderosa videos. Like, hey, Chanel, what's been going on at Ponderosa?
Yeah, that's a great idea. Like, are these wounds healed? Like what you guys have been living together. Like, are you still mad about, Rocksroy and Tori? Are you guys still feuding? No, we're like best friends now. Like, let's see that.
That's what I mean. I think that's sort of like the gold from these reunion shows historically.
Yeah, right. Like, yeah, exactly. I think that's what this needs is a little more of the Ponderosa dirt or just the general dirt. Just the, that's what we want from Survivor.
Yeah, I'm with you that I felt like that all of the episode was very exciting, and I was excited for the finale, but I did find that most of it was just sort of kind of fluff.
Yeah, pick an animal for these three.
I mean, first off, it's like, didn't Omar already give like an animal? Didn't he already do this? Yeah. And then, I just thought it was like, and if you're not holding my interest at the reunion show, I wasn't changing the channel, but still, like, it just seemed like that they didn't use the time effectively. And again, if this is like the biggest complaint in the season or in the finale, it was a very first world problem, but it was, I just think that it was, not super memorable.
Yeah, I agree. Not a great, but I remember really enjoying last seasson. It felt
it was a little more novel, I think, last season. And here tonight, like, I just felt like that. I mean, what did we cover? Like, covered the amulets, we covered the twists, and
animals.
And I felt like it's a little bit like hard on the finalists that don't win. Jeff went to Mike a couple times, like, Mike, you good with this? Like, what is he supposed to say?
Yeah. Like,
you're good with
it's the best. Like, I'm super disappointed. Also, though, to be fair, like, I don't know, like when you're there, you're like, oh my God, I'm the runner up on Survivor. That's amazing. It's not until later that the bitterness sets in.
Yeah. Mike was super magnanimous about the whole situation and said, like, he's rich in other ways, and congratulated Maryanne, and she was a worthy winner. And so, not bitter at all, but, a really tough spot to, put these people that just lost the game.
It's a great cast.
It's an incredible cast.
I feel like last season we were talking about what a great cast it is. Last season. Now everyone's like, last season's cast was abysmal.
No. I said that I stand on that. If tell me if this makes sense. That I think that the season 41 cast was great, but that I feel like that this cast, like, I feel like that the sum of the parts ends up making it even better. Whereas I feel like that the season 41 cast, like I feel like didn't have like the chemistry that the season 42 cast had.
Yeah, I think that's right. And just like the positive vibes that were like throughout the whole cast, it seemed.
Mm-hmm.
Who do you think was the juror who was the most influential at Ponderosa?
Boy, that's a really good question. I feel like that I have a couple of options. I think that it could have been High.
I think High would be my gut too.
Mm-hmm. And I think also potentially Chanel, mayor of Ponderosa.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Lindsay comes in, with a lot of the late game jurors have a lot of
sway.
It's like people who are out early kind of like form the general like esprit of Ponderosa, and the late gamers come in with like hot takes, and they're like, you can't vote for this jerk, So,
but I don't know necessarily like the person like comes in right before. Like I don't think I came in and had like a lot of sway on the jury.
Yeah. I remember Wentworth
one
coming
night,
in Cambodia, and then everyone be like, tell us, who's why, tell us again why we're voting for Jeremy. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I think it could have been High. I think you may be right about Chanel. Yeah.
Not Roxroy.
I mean, what about Drea? Is Drea a big
potentially?
Yeah.
Stephen, let's take some questions from the listeners of Rob's podcast here on finale night. Okay. Kara wants to know, could Romeo have chosen to make fire himself?
I think Romeo's hope to win this game was slim. I think he knew himself that he was a long shot. I think for him to be in the final three, to say I've gotten as far as I could, was a victory in itself, and also to like win his way into the final three. I mean, that's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he was going to throw that away. I didn't get the sense that Romeo didn't look like he was practicing making fire. It's just like what might have been for Romeo in a different season, because that as he said, like I went from being the boss to an employee, where that he really did have a very strong first half of the game. That being said, that they got to the merge and it just did not work out for Romeo.
Well, he just got left out of that big alliance when they all formed, and like could never basically recover from that. I feel like if Drea had just like brought him in then, that his whole game would have been different.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, she chose not to. It was interesting that Romeo said, if Jonathan had won, he was going to put himself in fire against Mike to like have another big moment. Yeah. Would Jonathan potentially have like gotten himself eliminated?
I don't think we've seen that yet. That'll be fun if that ever comes to be. Yeah. For all of the negative attention that the Final Four fire making goes, I don't think Maryanne gets to the final three without the Final Four fire making. Just to talk it through, and again, that everybody will say, well, I would have played my game differently if there was a vote at the Final Four. But that being said, hypothetically, say it's the same group, and so you would think that, okay, so Romeo is now immune, where Romeo would have been like the easy person to vote out in that spot. Even if like Maryanne and Romeo vote together and Romeo just doesn't side with the two guys, you figure that Maryanne will, best case scenario, end up in the fire making against whoever they put the votes on, whether that would have been Jonathan or Mike.
You don't think there's a world where they convince Jonathan to vote out Mike? I don't think that's a non-starter. Like, I think that they pitch Jonathan as like, hey,
it's possible.
Yeah,
it's possible, but I guess we'll never know. Okay,
it's like Ken voting out David.
Right. If Jonathan felt like that, okay, I need to make a big move to beat Mike in the fire making anyway. It certainly is a possibility. All right. This is a question that comes to us from William. If Lindsay plays her idol, how does the season go? Okay, that's saves Omer last week, and so then in that scenario, and we never got to the answer of what was Maryanne going to do on the tiebreak vote potentially, where Omer was saved. So that the votes against Omer are canceled. It's a 2-2 tie between Jonathan and Romeo. And then
I think Romeo's going home.
I do. I think I've come around. Yes.
Yeah.
So Romeo goes home. It's not that the final five. Maryanne is a very interesting swing at the final five, where Lindsay and Omer are going to want to take out Jonathan and Mike. And assuming Omer is not in the mix for that final five immunity, we saw Mike end up winning his immunity. I wonder if he still would play the idol on Maryanne. I think that Maryanne would probably vote with Mike and Jonathan in that spot. And
same kind of logic for her. Like, I can't beat Lindsay and Omer. I got to go with the guys I can beat here.
Right. Especially that she also made that big play against Omer in the last in the last round. And maybe Omer could talk her back into it, but it seems like that she had her mindset that she was going to try to get Omer out of the game. And so potentially, I think they do vote out Lindsay still in that spot.
Over Omer? Oh, because Lindsay's more of an immunity threat for the
right. And so I think they're a little bit more afraid of Lindsay is going to win the final four immunity. And then at the final four, and now Romeo's gone. Does come down to, I guess, Jonathan or Omer for Samotion? I guess there's a possibility where Omer could win, be the Romeo and win the final four Samotion and maybe win the game.
But if Jonathan wins, presumably then it's against. Well, who? Right. That's if Jonathan wins, who's he taking to the end? Maybe
he takes Maryanne and puts and lets Mike go into it. Or maybe maybe how about this?
So Maryanne wins anyway.
What if Jonathan would put himself into the fire making against Omer to take Omer out of the game? Would he be trying to do that?
Maybe, unless he wanted right. And so it's still Jonathan, Mike, and Maryanne, and Maryanne wins.
Yeah. But Maryanne doesn't have as many, Maryanne still has her idol at final five where she could have done something with it, but her big move was thwarted.
Yeah.
So it would have been interesting. Okay.
All right. Let's see what Fiend has to say. People are saying Maryanne should have played the idol on Lindsay at final five to have a flashier win. What are your thoughts?
Okay. Hey, Fiend. She did have a flashy win. She won 7-1.
Yeah.
What do you want?
Yeah. And also if Lindsay's there's a chance Lindsay wins. Like Maryanne's whole rationale for not saving Lindsay is that Lindsay, could win the whole thing.
Don't come out to us with your people are saying, find new people.
Lindsay have won some. I mean, Lindsay's short, so she has shorter arms.
Is that is that good or bad?
Well, I think bad for Samotion.
Because
there's you got to get from here to here to here with your arms. I really thought that was going to be my strength in Samotion.
But it had just been invented.
Yeah, exactly.
It went right from the art gallery. Yeah,
we were just crazy kids. She won, like you said.
Yeah, come on, take it easy. All right. How about this one, Stephen? Mary had a little winner. I don't think that's a stretch. What is the number one thing that Survivor 43 players should have learned from this season? How will they adapt to the challenges like the amulet introduced in Survivor 42? That's a great question. I will talk about that in depth coming up next week when I will bring Survivor Academy into full focus of Survivor Academy. What did we learn from Survivor 42? We will do that in our Patreon podcast feed. Stephen, do you have one thing in particular?
From Survivor 42, what did we learn? Gosh, one thing, one distilled thing. Oh God, that's a big question. I don't know.
Gotta have fun.
Have fun. Beware of the monster.
We'll go through it in depth on the Survivor Academy.
Well, one thing is, I mean, you gotta, don't make your move too soon, right? I think that's the big lesson of the last two seasons. Maybe, is, wait for the right moment, because, I think we saw over and over again this season and last season that the people who, peaked early were then immediately voted out. And, the two winners, Erica and Maryanne, kind of waited till the end, and then they struck at the big threats right at the end. They gave themselves enough of a resume to win the whole thing, but without having been a big threats throughout the whole season.
Yeah. So sort of jumping on that, I would say that my biggest lesson from Survivor 42, that I think that a lot of what Omer did in this season, I thought was really interesting and
Right.
new, of trying to make moves and not letting people know that you were the person making the moves. And ultimately, it's interesting where Maryanne really benefited from sort of like keeping secrets and not really taking so much credit. I mean, she was fortunate that they didn't really make her move, and maybe perhaps on television it was portrayed a little bit more as a Maryanne original. It kind of came up tonight that Mike and Jonathan were more in on the plan to take out Omer, and they were even taking ownership of it, that it was our idea to take out Omer. And then ultimately, that was, although we did see in the episode that Mike did seem to be saying to Maryanne, "Are you sure we shouldn't just vote out? Should we just vote out Romeo?" Now, was that part of the con job? Who knows? But that they did feel like they pushed back a little bit, like, "Hey, that was our idea to take out Omer in that spot." So she didn't really come across as the person who engineered that. Ultimately, her biggest move, that she takes out the idol and says, like, "Hey, I had the idol the whole time and I didn't save Lindsay, and I could have," is a move where it's like the ultimate like version of that, where it's like she tells them about a move that she didn't even make
Yeah.
and gets credit for it.
Well, and she
So,
also talked about how like she positioned herself to be in everybody's final three.
yes.
Which again, like salesmanship, like just saying like you're positioned to be in the final three does not necessarily mean you're positioned to win, but she pitched it as though it were, and they bought it. That's
Mhm.
the important thing. She sold this thing she did as being worthy of their votes, and they voted for her.
Yeah. It's not a video game. It's not about like knocking out the most the biggest threats. It's not about like collecting the most fishy awards for the season in the eyes of the other players.
Wow.
It's about having a story that you can tell to the jury at the end of the game, but not having one that is so flashy that you end up getting taken out yourself. You end up
Yeah.
being sort of like the white whale of somebody else's story.
Yeah.
You like that? I worked in the literary reference.
Oh, thanks. It was very classy.
Okay. All right. What does Anthony have to say?
Anthony wants to know, how big of an impact do you think Maryanne's big idol reveal had on the jurors?
I think that was the real, cherry on the cake. Would you say?
Yeah, that's definitely up there. I mean, what's interesting is like the substance of it, as you said, is like it really could not have been, or could have been like a very minor point, but she made it a big point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I think is a good one. I think I've seen like in Big Brother, people are like, "Oh, I had this advantage and I didn't even have to use it." And people are like, "Well, so what? Who cares?"
Yeah.
She did a great job of, making the jury interested in what she could have done. And especially it was the fact that, hey, and I kept the only secret in the game. I think
Right.
it held a lot of weight with the jury as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Sam G says, "What were your thoughts on the jury confessionals during the finale? Personally, I really love them. They gave some great context going into the final tribal council." Stephen, a lot has been made about the editing of this season. I have to say, I loved seeing the way that the jury thoughts were intercut with the final three breakfast, sort of everybody's talking about their thoughts going into the finale. I think in a lot of these finales, I think that's part of one of the most boring parts of the episode is when the final three or final two talks about how they see themselves going into the finale.
Yeah, I agree. It's always like, came on this crazy journey and I never imagined I'd be here. It's always the same thing. And so hearing the real specifics of the jury's perceptions of each character, as well as what the jury's looking for, was really fun. It's also just like brought in more characters. It's always fun to see these people who, are part of the show. We haven't seen a lot of them. It's fun to see them again here in this.
But it was edited in stylistically, and it gave us like really a sense of like, okay, well, what are the goals that each person needs to hit in the final tribal council?
Right. It motivated each contestant.
So motivated. Okay.
Motivated.
Okay. Justin wants to know, who would have won if Maryanne and Lindsay were both in the final, assuming that the third person was Romeo. Okay. So let's say Maryanne did make that big move.
Mhm.
Okay. Maryanne, flashy move in front of the jury. Wow. Okay. So now Maryanne has a person who is, like in her corner. And let's say Lindsay wins the final four immunity and takes Maryanne. Maryanne, I have to repay the favor. You played an idol on me. I'm going to take you to the final three. And then in that instance, Mike has to make fire against Romeo. Again, it's hard to imagine where. I guess maybe does Romeo still win some motion? Say Romeo still wins some motion. He takes Maryanne and Lindsay beats Mike in the fire. Okay, let's do it that way. Okay, so Lindsay, Maryanne, Romeo. I think it's tough. I think you're gonna have some people like Omer. Like, where does Omer go? Lindsay was a tight ally of his. And does he go? It seems like the players had less questions about what Lindsay's game was about.
Yeah, it did seem like Lindsay seemed like a real favorite at that point. And when Lindsay was voted out, we saw a lot of jury people being like, "Oh, that's too bad," you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I mean, it seemed like they were sort of rooting for her.
I think it would have been close. I really do. I think that there were some solid Maryanne votes in Tori for sure. I think that Lindsay might have eked out Maryanne. Maryanne herself wanted to get Lindsay out of the game. I don't know if I can beat Lindsay. So Maryanne seemed rightfully concerned that Lindsay would beat her in a final three.
I mean, and again, like Maryanne's, best moment was her final tribal performance. Who knows how Lindsay's final tribal performance would have been. So
I think it would have been close. I think it would have been probably like 5-3 one way or the other.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Stephen, how about from Micah Rooney?
All right, Micah Rooney wants to know, do you think if Mike had been more upfront about burning people at Final Tribal, he would have won? Or at least had a significantly better shot at it? Well, it sure sounds like it.
Yes. Again, that Maryanne was incredible. I don't know if Mike gets it. Like, if Mike would have been better, would it have helped his chances? Yes. Right. But could he have overcome how good Maryanne was? I don't think so. I think that if Mike would have been good and Maryanne had been bad, I think Mike would win.
So you think even a good Mike final tribal performance is still getting overshadowed by Maryanne's performance here?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that again, are we saying that Mike was like Mike also gave an all-time performance? No,
but like Mike gives I think we're saying like Mike, we walk in and the jury is predisposed to Mike, right? 5 or 6 to whatever the other number is. And the Mike gives them enough reason to not change their votes. But Maryanne has this stellar performance.
Yeah. I got the sense that maybe there were a lot of people that were sort of like 60-40 for Mike.
Right.
Wanted to hear what both of them had to say. And if he's just good, but she's incredible, like I think she still gets it. Maybe he can pick up a vote or two.
Right.
But 7-1 deficit is tough to overcome. I think if Maryanne flopped and Mike was good, I think Mike would win.
Yeah. Makes
okay.
sense.
All right, Stephen, any other thoughts on Survivor 42? Do you want to talk about Survivor 43?
Wow. I mean, that octopus.
Is that the monster?
That's the monster. Yeah. In the logo, there's an octopus.
Should they have waited for like Survivor 48 to bring out the octopus? Yeah. 88. Survivor 88.
Even 44, it's like the 4s. We got the 8.
2, 4, 4 and 4.
Let's go one more season. You're so excited about
the octopus. They wasted the octopus.
Hashtag wasted octopus.
Hashtag
this. I mean, I don't know. The preview was like every other preview. Like this game is moving so fast.
They found some new people. Yeah. No mention of like reading a clue for an advantage, so we don't have to worry about that for next season. Yeah. So.
I mean, it'll be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay. All right. Will you come back in the fall for the 10-year anniversary of Survivor Know-It-Alls?
Like digitally, like remotely, like like what do you mean? You like come back in person?
Come back in person where? What do you come into my house?
Oh, I don't know. I didn't know what you were asking. Come back. Like,
will you be back on the podcast this fall?
Yeah, my God.
Okay.
Of course.
All right. I think there's gonna be a cliffhanger this summer. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That is no fishy. Maryanne gets all the fishy.
Fishy from Maryanne. My God.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about what else is coming up here on Rob Has a Podcast. So of course, Final 5 exit interview special coming up. That's going to be on tomorrow afternoon. Be on the lookout for that. Plus, I will do a special feedback show with Jenny Autumn coming up on Thursday. So be on the lookout for that. And then we will bring you a special Survivor Academy, what we learned from Survivor 42, coming up next week. All right, here on Rob's Podcast for the patrons of Rob's Podcast, and then wall-to-wall coverage over on our Survivor podcast feed. Allie Lasher is going to be on the B&B. Why blank won, and they also talk about why a bunch of people lost. And then the great Nick Iadanza. What's his other nickname?
Nick Cesternino or Nick,
Yes,
Nick
that's
Cesternino?
right.
Sorry,
Yep.
Cesternino.
Yep. He's going to be with Shannon Gus on Survivor Global. Brendan the Actor Meyer is going to be joining Taryn Armstrong. That's going to be live at 9:30 Eastern with Taryn. And then be sure to check out the Purple Pants podcast. I'm sure that Bryce and Wendell and even Jack Atkins will have a lot to say about the big win from Maryanne coming up. That's all at robbinswebsite.com/survivor feed. Watched a very fun movie with Chappelle this week, Senior Year, starring Rebel Wilson, the #1 movie on Netflix, over on Nothing But Netflix.
Was it actually really fun?
I really did enjoy it. I thought that was
the trailers looked very fun.
Was it fun? Was it fun? What are you, Mike White?
Was it dangerous?
Was it dangerous?
Yeah.
Well, here's the pitch, that she's a high school student in 2002 and gets a major head injury and is in a coma for 20 years. So yeah, dangerous fun, Steven.
Wow. That's everything that I want out of a show.
Yeah. So check that out. Senior Year on Nothing But Netflix. We wrapped up our Circle coverage over on our Circle podcast feed. Taryn Armstrong is hosting a live Circle roundtable at 4 p.m. Eastern to close out coverage of the Circle season 4. Be on the lookout for that. And then over on the Wrestling RHAP Up, a great episode this week from Matt and Mari breaking down everything that's going on with the Sasha Banks and Naomi situation. Check that one out. Really proud of the work that Matt and Mari are doing over on the Wrestling RHAP Up. Check them out every single week, talking about what's going on in the world of wrestling and everything else we have going on in our patron podcast feed. Of course, why don't you wait until June to become a patron here at the end of the month, where we have so much going on. But in the meantime, we have our patron podcast feed with the Survivor Academy, Patron 5 for 5, and of course, everything going on in our patron community. We have a lot of big stuff coming up for the patrons this summer. Some are calling it a hot patron summer, Stephen.
Some people are saying.
Yes. And so we've got a lot of great stuff coming your way for the patrons of Rob as a Podcast. There's a few things that we're excited to announce coming up this June at robswebsite.com/patron. And of course, make sure you subscribe to the podcast, robswebsite.com/subscribe. Stephen, what a treat it is to get to do the Survivor Know-It-Alls.
I know.
I never take it for granted. Yes.
Yeah. It's we've been doing it for so long.
It'll be 10 years this fall.
Our lives have changed in so many ways.
Mm-hmm.
We should have a retrospective, just like,
Oh, the best of the Survivor Know-It-Alls.
Well, I was just thinking like scenes of us, side by side and seeing how old and withered we've gotten over. You look better than ever. You're like
come on, get out of here.
I feel like it's now that your kids are a little older, they're a little more, you don't know, the sleepless nights are not so sleepless.
Is that what's going on? I think that
that's what I tell myself, that there's a bright light on the horizon.
I think the filters on the cameras get better. That's what's going on. Technology has
you look fantastic, Rob. You're beautiful.
Oh, all right, Stephen, don't make it weird for everybody. All right. But Stephen, another great season of podcast coverage. Any big plans for the summer?
Just kind of stay cool,
Okay.
I live in Washington, D.C. now. I just want to keep the AC
swampy.
on.
And, I used to think they called it the swamp because of all the corruption, but no, it really is very muggy. Okay.
Muggy. What about you? How's NC?
It's good. It's a little muggy. Gotta be honest. But we'll have some fun stuff. Gonna have a little bit of some downtime, but I hope to bring you plenty of deep dives, medium dives, maybe a few short dives with the Survivor 42 cast coming your way. So
who's the first deep dive?
Unconfirmed yet. There's a little bit of a process that we go through. I know people are probably looking for them on Friday. CBS likes to be in the loop on these things. They want you to get the sign off, so they don't always say yes right away. Sometimes they get a little busy with the finale. So we will, as soon as we can, we will bring you some really fun deep dives with this cast.
Who's the first person you emailed for a deep dive?
Steven,
you don't have to tell me that.
I'm not allowed.
I don't want to know. I don't want
to correspond with the contestants.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you of course email.
Yes. Okay. All right. Thank you all so much for joining us for another season of Survivor here on Rob Is the Podcast. Congratulations again to Maryanne. Take care, everybody. Have a good one.